day everyone, and welcome to Malaysia Political Fund, where we discuss important political issues shaping the future of our country. Today, we will be examining a highly debated topic in temporary Malaysia politics: Perikatan Nasional, a credible alternative government or a populist opposition. Malaysia's political landscape has undergone significant changes over the past decade. Since the historical 2018 general elections, voters have witnessed the fall of long-standing political dominance, the emergence of new coalitions, and political realignments and changes in governments. Among these developments, one coalition that has gained substantial attention is Perikatan Nasional. Formed in 2020, PN quickly rose to national prominence and has since become one of the strongest opposition coalitions in Malaysia. Supporters viewed PN as a visible alternative government capable of replacing the current administration. Critics, however, argue that PN relies heavily on populist rhetoric, ethnic narratives, and anti-establishment sentiments rather than comprehensive policy solutions. To discuss these issues, we have interviewed two distinguished panelists. Panelist 1 will present the arguments that Perikatan Nasional is a credible alternative government. Panelist 2 will discuss the argument that Perikatan Nasional functions primarily as a purposive opposition. Welcome to both of you.
Hello viewers, and thanks for having me today.
Thank you, it's a pleasure to be here.
To begin our discussions, let us first understand what Perikatan Nasional is. Panelist 1, could you briefly explain the background of PS and how it emerges as a major political force in Malaysia?
Definitely, Perikatan Nasional emerged following the political crisis commonly known as the Sheraton move in February 2020. The coalition was formed primarily by Bersatu PAS and several other parties. Following the collapse of the Pakatan Harapan government, PN successfully formed a federal government under the Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin. Although the coalition government for a relatively short period, it established it as a significant political player. Since then, PN has continued to expand its support base, particularly among Malay Muslim voters. In the 2022 general election, PN achieved remarkable gains and became one of the most largest political blocs in parliament. Its strong performance in several state elections further demonstrated it no longer a temporary coalition but a major force in Malaysia politics.
Panelist 2, what is then the rapid rise of PN?
Several factors contributed to PN's rise. First, many voters became frustrated with political instability after 2018. Second, economic changes, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, increased public dissatisfaction. Third, PN successfully presented itself as a defender of Malay Muslim interests and positioned itself against political elects, whom some voters blame for instability. These factors enabled PN to attract support from voters seeking change and alternative leadership.
To analyze this issue academically, our group applies populism theory. Panelist 2, could you explain what populism means in political science?
Currently, populism is a political ideology or strategy that portrays society as divided into opposing groups. On one side are the ordinary people, on the other side are the corrupt elects. According to political scientist Cass Mod, populism claims that politics should reflect the general will of the people and often citizens, established institutions, and ruling elects. Populist leaders usually present themselves as the true representative of ordinary citizens. They frequently argue that political elects are disconnected from public concerns.
How does this theory relate to Perikatan Nasional?
Many scholars identify populist elements in PN's political messaging. For example, PN frequently citizens political elects, corruption, and government failures. Its leaders often emphasize that they represent ordinary Malaysians who feel neglected by traditional political parties. PN also highlights issues such as living cost, economic hardship, and concerns regarding cultural and religious identity. These are common terms found in populist movements worldwide.
Before we continue our discussions, our group interviewed local Malaysian citizens to understand public perceptions of Perikatan Nasional. Hi, thank you for joining our short interview. We are doing a student video for the Malaysia politics. May I ask, do you think Perikatan Nasional is a credible alternative government or more of the populist opposition? Why?
I think Perikatan Nasional has become an important political force in Malaysia. They have gained strong support and have experience in government. However, I still can concern about whether they can represent all the communities equally. Therefore, I believe Perikatan Nasional has potential, but it still needs to prove itself as a credible alternative government.
The response reflects some of the key debates surrounding PN, which we can now discuss further. Panelist 1. Does being associated with populism necessarily means political corruption lacks credibility?
Not necessarily. Many successful governments around the world have used populist narrative to mobilize public support. Populism itself is not inherently negative. The key question is whether the coalition can translate public support into effective governance and policy implementation. A party may use populist strategy while it's possessing the capability to govern effectively.
Let us discuss the first perspective. Panelist 1. Why should Malaysians view PN as a credible alternative government?
There are several reasons. First, PN has actual governing experience at the federal level, unlike some opposition parties that have never governed. PN led the country during one of the most challenging periods in the modern history, which is the pandemic COVID-19. During this period, the government introduced various economic assistance packages, such as wage subsidies program and public health measures. Whether one agrees with all of these policies or not, PN demonstrated that it could be operate government institution and manage national administration. Second, PN has achieved significant electoral success. In 2022 general election, PN won 74 parliamentary seats, making it one of the most largest political coalition in parliament. This results indicates substantial public confidence. In a democratic system, electoral system is an important indicator of a political legitimacy. Third, PN possesses strong organizational networks. PAS has extensive grassroots missionary, particularly in Kelantan, Terengganu, Kedah, and parts of northern Peninsula Malaysia. These networks allow PN to communicate effectively with the voters and mobilize support.
Besides electoral strength, what other factors contribute to PN's credibility?
Another factor is policy development. PN has increasingly attempted to present itself as a government in waiting. Its leaders frequently comment on economic management, fiscal responsibility and governance reform, and also anti-corruption measures. This coalition has also established shadow cabinet-like structures and policy committees. Furthermore, democracy functions best when voters have meaningful alternatives. A strong opposition coalition creates a competition and encourages accountability. If PN continues strengthening its policy proposal and leadership capacity, it can become a serious contender for federal power.
Some critics argue that PN appeals mainly to Malay voters. How would you respond?
While it's true that PN's strongest support comes from Malay voters, political support bases can evolve over time. Many successful political parties initially emerge from a specific demographic group before expanding their appeal. If PN can broaden its policy agenda and addresses issues affecting all Malaysians, it may gain wider support in the future.
Attitude. Why do critics argue that PN is primarily a populist opposition rather than a credible alternative government?
There are several concerns. First, critics argue that PN relies heavily on identity politics. Its campaigns frequently focus on issues related to ethnicity, religion, and cultural identity. Also, these issues are important. Excessive reliance on identity-based narratives can contribute to social polarization. Second, critics claim that PN often emphasizes criticism rather than policy solutions. Opposition parties naturally citizen governments. However, voters also expect a detailed proposal regarding economic growth, investment, technological innovation, education reform, and environmental stability. Some observers argue that PN's policy framework remains less developed compared to its political messaging.
Could you elaborate further?
Certainly, another concern relates to governance stability. PN's federal administration lasted approximately 70 months before losing parliamentary support. Critics argue that this permitted revealed changes in coalition management and political stability. Furthermore, Malaysia is a highly diverse society, consisting of different ethnic, religious, and cultural groups. A coalition aspiring to govern nationally must demonstrate inclusiveness and appeal beyond its core supporters. Many analysts argue that PN still face difficulties attracting substantive support from Chinese and Indian voters. Without broader national appeal, questions remain regarding its ability to govern effectively on behalf of all Malaysians.
Would it be fair to say that PN's popularity is driven more by dissatisfaction with existing governments rather than confidence in PN itself?
This is one interpretation. Political scientists often observe that opposition parties gain support when voters became dissatisfied with incumbents. The challenge for PN is providing that voters support its vision and policies, rather than simply using it as a protest vote against current leaders.
I would now like both panelists to respond directly to each other's arguments. Panelist 1, your response?
While criticism regarding populist exists, they should not overshadow PN's achievements. Every political coalition uses narrative that resonate with voters. What matters is whether the coalition can convert public support into governance capacity. PN has already demonstrated it can govern and compete effectively in elections. There are characteristics of a credible political alternative.
Panelist 2?
I agree that electoral success is important. However, governance a country requires more than winning elections. It requires long-term policy planning, inclusive governance, and the ability to unite diverse communities. Until PN demonstrates these qualities more consistently, debate regarding its credibility will continue.
What impact could PN have on Malaysia's future political landscape?
PN's growth could strengthen democratic competition. Strong competition encourages government to improve performance and remain responsive to citizens. The presence of credible opposition also increases accountability.
At the same time, Malaysia must ensure that political competition remains constructive. Political parties should compete through policy innovation rather than device rhetoric. The future political landscape will depend on whether PN evolves into a broad-based governing coalition or remaining primarily an opposition movement.
As we conclude today's discussions, we can see that opinions regarding Perikatan Nasional remain divided. Supporters argue that PN's process governing experience, electoral legitimacy, strong rural support, and the capacity to become a credible alternative government. Critics, however, argue that PN relied heavily on populist narratives and identity politics while still needing to demonstrate broader inclusiveness and stronger policy development. Using populism theory, we can understand how PN's appeal to voters who feel dissatisfied with political elite and existing governance. Ultimately, whether PN becomes a credible future government or remains a populist opposition will depend on its ability to broaden its appeal, strengthen its policies, and convince Malaysians that it can govern effectively. Thank you for joining us today. Goodbye and see you in the next episode of Malaysia's Political Forum.